continue with the broadcast and we stay in the company of our Salam Media listeners, our viewers. We also welcome One Nation 88.9 FM out of Polokwane to the broadcast this morning. If you have just tuned in, it is the day of Friday. Juma Mubarak to one and all as we welcome you to the show. And we move ahead with the show this morning, taking a look at what is taking place in occupied Palestine. The Zionist Israeli government, Netanyahu, claiming an agreement has been reached with the far right to form a government. We joined this morning on the broadcast with Hafiz Ibrahim Musa from the Palestine Information Network. Hafiz Ibrahim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Juma Mubarak to you and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Inayat, and pleasure speaking to you as always.
Well, as always, we welcome your views and, looking at occupied Palestine, looking at the Zionist entity of Israel. We speak about the right and the far right and the left to the right, and we're actually getting all mixed up with all these directions, and one actually needs a GPS to actually understand. But at the end of the day, how much more right can the far right get to what we see in someone like Benjamin Netanyahu?
This is a relevant change or relevant shift in Israeli politics, but as you have hinted there in your question, I think we should be very wary of falling into the traps that have been created by liberal Zionists, by the United States of America, that is, trying to issue or offer some sort of opposition or sense of opposition to the current government. So these are all very relative labels that we use, right and left and center, within Israeli politics, because there are maybe eligible to use such labels when it comes to the internal politics of the Israeli state and their policies with regard to the citizens, the Jewish citizens of the Zionist state. But when it comes to the policy, the foreign policy towards Palestinians, I think whether it's right, left, or center, the kind of ideology has been constant. And one just has to take statements that are attributed to the likes of the outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid, who was labeled a centrist. If one has to just reproduce the statements of such people without putting a name to them, one would easily say these were the words of Netanyahu or these were the words of Itamar Ben Gavir, when in actual fact it was from a person who was labeled a centrist. And just going one step back, we know that this year, 2022, has been the most deadly year for Palestinians since 2005. And the levels of settler violence have been astounding. It was under the reign of Yair Lapid that we saw another attack on Gaza. It was under the the reign that we saw such statistics that I've described. It was under the reign that we saw the shameless assault on Shireen Abu Akleh and the desecration of her funeral. So that in itself offers a visible picture that yes, we should be concerned about the people who have now ascended power in Israel, but let us not be deceived by these labels.
Exactly. And I think this is just a play of words when it comes to the mainstream media in terms of providing these labels and looking at, talking now about a far right anti Arab party joining the proposed Netanyahu coalition. But again, these are just words that they are playing with because we know that all these governments we're talking about an anti-Arab party that they're talking about, but they've been anti-Palestine, they've been anti-Arab all along, and this has been taking place for well over 7 decades.
And I'll mention in that regard, Inayat, what Ali Abu Nemeh of the Electronic Intifada has said, that this needs to be viewed when we talk about right and left and all these kind of policies. Let's view it from the prism of Palestinians. And he says, from the perspective and experience of Palestinians, any change in an Israeli government is merely a change in the pair of hands holding the axe. It's the same X, a great metaphor. It's the same X, and it's still going to come down on Palestinian necks, no matter which executioner is now wielding it. What the difference is, though, is Israelis now feel emboldened to drop the mask. So there's been this picture that have been painted by Israeli liberal Zionists in our country, South Africa, and other parts of the world, that Israel is a democracy, that Israel is this technological miracle, and using all kind of socialist descriptions of Israel through the kibbutz and so forth going forward, going in the past, but they felt now emboldened with the passage of time, with the world giving them leeway, with the mild condemnations from governments around the world, with the mild support from the Muslim Ummah, with the normalization that has taken place through the Arab states, with all the military support that has gone to Israel. They've now felt emboldened to drop the masks. There's no need to sugarcoat. And now, what was dormant racism or what was disguised racism, they feel now emboldened enough to come out in the open. And that's it's probably a much greater degree than the United States, but it's very much the same metaphor as the Democrats versus the Republicans. The same policies, the same foreign interventions, the same crimes, but just a different face to it.
Yes, and also I think, Hafiz Ibrahim, you make mention of the recognition that these leaders get, and when one looks at Netanyahu, the whole cloud of corruption that's hanging over him. This guy Ben Gavir, he was convicted of supporting terrorism, inciting racism. Yet these are people that get recognition, and get recognition not only by the supporters of Israel right across the entire world, governments we're talking about, but also you're talking about those that have normalized relationship with Israel.
Yes, and they're going to be facing a uphill task. There's already reports that those countries that have normalized are trying to. They are uneasy, just as the liberal Zionists are uneasy that this is now showing the real face of Israel. How do the normalizers deal with the heat now? They've tried to paint the relationship with Israel in a positive light, and this is going to be mutually beneficial to us, and somehow this is going to bring peace to the Palestinians. When the words from the mouth of Itamar Ben Gavir clearly indicate the opposite, they clearly indicate that the Arabs, as he sees them, and we're talking here about the citizens, those who are considered citizens of the state of Israel, are actually a fifth column, and he wants them expelled. Just a few days ago, we had Hamouri of Adamir being expelled as well. As a precursor to some of these policies. So it's going to be a tough climb for many of these states. But at the same time, what we do find is Benjamin Netanyahu wants to clinch the deal. Whether he'll be successful or not, it's not clear. But the real prize, as they would see it, in open normalization with the state of Israel would be Saudi Arabia. And there have been talk about that. Netanyahu recently did an interview with Al Arabiya, and we spoke about the great prospects that would come out of such open normalization. So on the one hand, you have the Arab normalizers who are going to be grappling with all that is coming out, and I think something that's going to put a big spanner in the works is a guy like Ben Gavir, who has instigated the Jerusalem Intifada last year, who instigated all that happened in Sheikh Jarrah. Is now in charge of the police ministry, the security ministry, and his views on Masjid al-Aqsa are very, very clear. So how are the Arab normalizers ever going to come to deal with a person like that, who now has all the resources and clout behind him? But as I said, despite the big dilemma that they face on their hands, the indications from Netanyahu are clear that just as he produced all these rabbits out of the hat to buttress his political position previously amidst corruption charges. He's going to still try to impress on the Israeli electorate his sway over neighboring nations by trying to sue for that ultimate normalization that with Saudi Arabia.
Yes, and while all of this is playing out, it is clear that many of the supporters of Palestine, the activists, right across the entire world, because governments may say one thing, but the situation on the ground reflects a completely different picture. Hafiz Ibrahim, and again, to step up a gear to continue putting pressure on this Zionist state of Israel, and through activism and through many other forms of activism that we've seen over the years through solidarity organizations, those that are sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, but also at the same time looking at governments like South Africa, for example. And, I had the opportunity of speaking with the International Relations Minister, Naledi Pandor, where we raised the issue, and she was of the view that Palestinians, even in, looking at South Africa, we need to be treating the Palestinians better than what we even treat the Israelis. So these are some of the initiatives and actions that are at our disposal, and at the same time continue, informing ourselves through organizations like yourself, educating ourselves so that we can keep up the pressure.
And we should note then, Inayat, that this is an intensification of the Israeli assaults on the Palestinians. I mentioned Masjid al-Aqsa earlier. The de facto annexation is going to be happening with the likes of Bezalel Smotrich now in charge of the defense ministry, and he's been given special powers over the West Bank. I mentioned also the idea of transfer, which is the root of the Kahanist party, which has now fed into its prodigies like Itamar Ben Gvir, that becoming mainstream, and we've also got trends, the extreme tilt to the right, relatively speaking, in Israeli society, and how the young in Israeli society are increasingly mobilizing behind such views. So this represents an acid test and a very clear moment for the solidarity movement, as well as people who have been sitting on the fence around the world. When Israelis no longer see the need to sugarcoat themselves and sugarcoat the occupation and sugarcoat apartheid, why is it that we should still be handling the issue with kids' gloves? Why should governments still be reluctant or still have to think deeply before using the characterizations of apartheid vis-a-vis Israel? And when it comes to the solidarity community, it's really well past its sell by date to be having discussions relating to to a two-state solution or the peace process. And there's also the important discussion that needs to be brought to the fore of relations with the Palestinian Authority, and still buttressing the Palestinian Authority, which has lost the confidence of Palestinians. And basically, we moving very fast to direct Israeli control of the West Bank. And another issue for the solidarity community to clearly articulate on going forward would be the issue of equivocation on the armed resistance. A majority of Palestinians support the armed resistance. We've got recently the imagination of Palestinians captured by groups such as the Lion's Den. We've got the popularity of groups such as Hamas spikes when the resistance against the Israelis are successful. So this is the popular voice of Palestinians, and it is inconceivable for people to be speaking on behalf of Palestinians or advocating on behalf of Palestinians at such a critical time and still disavowing or trying to minimize the role and importance of all forms of Palestinian resistance, in this case, particularly armed resistance as well.
Well, Hafiz Ibrahim, Jazakallah khairan so much. We can engage so much more on what you've just said, but inshallah, we will leave it for another day. But for now, Jazakallah for your time. We do appreciate you taking time out and talking to us this morning right here on Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
بارك الله فيك وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته عناية.
Hafiz Ibrahim Musa, Palestine Information Network with us this morning. We're going to go for a break. We come back looking at the aftermath of the 55th ANC conference, and we've seen so much reaction coming through. And this morning we're looking at the Workers' and Socialist Party. The billionaire Ramaphosa has won, but this time he won the shovels to dig the grave of the ANC. So say the Workers' and Socialist Party.